That's cool. That's really cool. Because what do they usually use? I guess they use like an iOS language, right?
Yeah, I mean, typically you have to write in Objective-C or Swift for iOS and
Oh yeah, Swift. That's
Java for Android.
Good thing we're not recording video. I'm surprised my cat hasn't jumped up here because he's kind of a jerk. Welcome to the Web of Tomorrow. We're your hosts, Riley Carrasquillo
And I'm Adam Harris.
And today we are going to talk about not at all anything that we said we were going to talk about last week, as usual. But today we're going to talk about how you can use JavaScript, CSS, and HTML to create mobile apps, right?
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about this thing called Cordova / Phonegap.
Sweet. Why is it called that?
It's got kind of a complicated history that I don't think anyone quite fully understands. But I think Adobe started it, and they called it Phonegap. But then I think they handed it over to Apache to make it open source, and they had to give it a new name for some reason. So it's called Cordova under Apache. But then it's weird because Adobe maintains a fork of that, and they call it Phonegap. And Adobe adds some additional features if you want to pay Adobe for those features.
That's an interesting setup. Adobe is definitely a very interesting company. I feel like they dabble in a whole lot of random things in very random ways too. Like the only thing that I think is very straightforward that I know that they do is like their photo manipulation tools and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Their creative cloud, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if it still is, but Phonegap used to be built into some versions of Dreamweaver.
Oh, really? I have Dreamweaver, actually.
You could build it with Dreamweaver, and then... So basically, Adobe, the additional features you could pay for is called Phonegap Build, and you don't even have to have a Mac computer to make an iOS app, which typically you have to have. That's a requirement. You have to have a Mac computer to make an iPhone app. But what they would do is you'd send off your code to Adobe servers, and then they would compile it into an app for you.
So say you want to start using this. What do? Do you get on? Is it kind of typical where you? Is it an app that you download, or is it like something you download through Node.js? Like, what is it how do you start this process of using Cordova?
Yeah, it's really easy. You just install it with Node or NPM. You just do npm install -g Cordova. And then you've got, you've got a command line tool. And so they've got a command where you can create a new Cordova app, and it creates a basic structure for your app with different folders, and you've got a www folder. And that's where you put all your code. But you've also got a plugins folder, and that's where all of your different plugins will live. And then you've got a platforms folder, and that will have like an Android folder inside of it and an iOS folder inside of that.
So what are some of its limitations?
Well, it can take advantage of all the different native functionalities of a phone, like text messaging and GPS. And
dude, working remotely with us, I think I've become more interviewing.
Well, you need to, because I'm the only one that knows about this topic. So
I guess so. Technically, I don't know about it. Wait, you're the only one in the whole world? Did you build Cordova?
Yeah. No. But at my last job, it was my job to build a Cordova app.
Oh, cool. How was that? So tell us a little bit about that process. What did that feel like, and what was that like, I guess?
Do you want me to talk about the limitations first?
Yeah, tell us about it in the scope of what you were doing, if you can. I don't want you to share company secrets, obviously, but tell us what you can tell us.
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything about Cordova when I got that job, and their documentation is really pretty good. One thing that's lacking, I guess, is at least at the time, this was like 2 years ago, was the number of plugins and the quality of plugins. So for instance, we basically needed 3 different plugins for different things like text messaging that didn't really exist in a very good form. And so actually for the text messaging plugin, I had to take an existing one that worked on Android, and I had to take another one that worked pretty well for iOS, and then combine them into one plugin and then improve it a little bit. So that kind of stank because you're only supposed to be writing like JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. But for these plugins, I had to go in and change them, and that meant I had to look at some native code. I had to look at some Objective-C code for iOS, and had to look at some Android Java code for Android. And then also, it's really good for getting started fast using a technology that you already know, but it's not as performant as native code.
So I'm looking at this. I'm just looking at an article really quick, and I just wanted to say, I guess there's several of these out there. These they call them cross-platform mobile apps type thing or something like that, and they're looping in. I think a lot of these are probably quite a bit different, because they probably are for the purpose of being able to make changes between your mobile app and your web app, but they're looping in this Cordova as well under this. So I guess there's like a mobile Angular UI that you can use as well.
Well, I mean, you can use Angular in a Cordova app.
Right, and Bootstrap and anything else, I guess, that you could use as far as JavaScript and libraries and frameworks, right?
Yeah, and there's this thing called Ionic.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that's actually the first thing I was going to say, but then I saw that really quick. But yeah, go ahead. Tell us about Ionic.
Yeah, Ionic is basically, it uses Cordova and Angular.
Interesting.
That's pretty much what it is. There's more to it than that, but it's Cordova and Angular. And then Meteor also comes with Cordova. So you can make a Meteor website and then also publish it with Cordova to a mobile app.
So obviously they have like jQuery mobile, which is like specifically for mobile. And then there's like Onsen UI.
Yeah, so those are just UIs. Actually, on the Cordova app that I made, we used jQuery UI.
That makes sense. Was Angular fairly popular around that time? I don't know how long ago this was.
Yeah, it was. I just didn't know it. So we were just basically using jQuery UI and then vanilla JavaScript.
So really quick, let me say this. There are several native languages to mobile development that we haven't really mentioned, and that includes Java for Android and Objective-C and Swift for iOS development. So do we want to talk a little bit about that and maybe go into a little bit more detail about that?
I've never done native development, but I mean, if you've got the resources and the knowledge of how to do that, then that's probably your best route to making mobile apps. But not everyone can learn both platforms, right? So that's why there's all these different native or hybrid solutions. Yeah, and just to go a little bit into this, most companies today are doing a mobile app of some sort, especially where it's really necessary to increase efficiency, or there's just many reasons why you would want to jump into getting a mobile app as well as a web app. And this makes it there's those hybrid solutions, and then things like Cordova or Phonegap make it so that you can work between the two. You don't necessarily have to learn a new language or jump out of the environment, I guess, that you're used to, or the languages that you're used to, which is super cool. Yeah. And, I would say you only want to do a mobile app, in my opinion, if you need to take advantage of some sort of native functionality, or if you just really want an icon on people's home screen. But if it's just informational content, I typically advise people just do a website. But yeah, that's what's really great about Cordova or Phonegap is you've got access to all the native features with camera and file system and contacts and GPS and all that stuff.
And going back to a little bit to before what we were talking about with the article that I was reading out loud, it looks like there's just a ton of support that's going into this, I guess, hybrid movement, and like Angular and jQuery and all these different frameworks are making mobile friendly type tools so that you can focus on doing the same things that you would typically do in a mobile, but using JavaScript instead.
Yeah. I mean, and there's different approaches. There's some approaches where you write it in JavaScript and then it actually turns that JavaScript code into native code. But that's not what Cordova is doing. Or then there's an approach that React Native is taking where it's actually running the JavaScript in the app, but it's not running inside of a web view. It's running in a native view. So the approach that Cordova takes is it's running your JavaScript in a web view, and then the plugins are a JavaScript library sort of that you can call from your JavaScript, and then the plugins call the native code.
And Adam, this might be a really good time to also remind everybody about Chrome developer tools and how it has that ability to debug and do things with mobile.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit more in context now than when we talked about it earlier.
Yeah, so it's actually super cool with Cordova and Chrome developer tools because you can plug your phone into your computer and then you run your Cordova app and it will run the phone on your device. But then you can use Chrome remote debugging and you've got all your standard developer tools for the app that's running on your phone. So it's super cool.
Yeah, this has been actually really informative and pretty cool to talk about because it's not something that I knew a lot about before we jumped into today's webisode. But, I was thinking about it, and this is also a really great thing to know for those entrepreneurial type programmers out there. I feel like there's a lot more entrepreneurs learning programming because, they want to keep their organization fairly bare bones and cheap, and they want to be able to get their product or whatever it is off the out of just the thought process and into like a materialized idea, and so this is cool because you can, if you do need mobile or if that's something that you want to do, then you have the ability to do that, right? You have the ability to do it yourself. You can, without having to learn a bunch of different languages, and ultimately it's really just dependent on your skills.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is probably a good time to remind everybody that we love doing this. We're having a really good time doing it. We hope that you guys are getting a lot of value out of it. And a really great way to show us that you are getting a lot of value out of it is to rate or subscribe or comment or do any of those, cool diddly type things. We really appreciate you guys joining us for this journey, and we hope that you continue to do so, and we hope that you also continue to give us good feedback on what we can do better or things that you guys are most interested in and like to hear about. Look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Next time on the Web of Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about different things that you can plug your light bulbs into for optimizing your JavaScript.